Ladies and gentlemen, it's Reid coming back at you today with another tips and tricks video on MLB The Show 19. And today I wanted to do a real quick one to describe to you guys and show you how you can re-sign players in MLB The Show 19. Now, it's slightly different than other games in that you only have certain periods in which the game actually allows you to re-sign players. It's quite different from Madden per se, where you can re-sign players all year long. Where in this game, I've discovered that there's only 2 or 3 periods where you're actually capable of re-signing players. And number one is if you start a franchise in spring training, it will allow you to have the option to re-sign players during the period of spring training up until the start of the regular season. So that's number one. But a lot of people overlook that and skip that, and I actually did that myself because I thought that I would have other opportunities to sign those players, and I wasn't quite sure when that would be. I figured at the very least at the end of the season, whenever off-season starts, I'll be able to re-sign those players. And there is another period which will allow you to sign players, and that is the trade deadline prep phase. And this happens right here on July 15th, I believe we're on. Yeah, on July 15th, only 3 games after the All-Star break, 3 days after the All-Star break, it gave me an option to finally actually re-sign players again. So, and I believe the reason it's giving you this is mainly for the fact that, you're prepping for the trade deadline. You want to find out who's going to be on your team long term and who you need to trade for. So that is what I wanted to show you guys in terms of period of time whenever you're able to re-sign players. Now, I believe you are also able to re-sign them during the off-season whenever your team actually hits off-season, so keep that in mind. But the other thing is you're only able to do contract extensions through this period. So players that are arbitration eligible, you're not going to be able to do arbitration right now. You're only going to be able to do a full contract payout, and that adds on to the end of whatever their current contract is. So if you go over to your budget, you'll be able to see what players have, what type of contract, what budget, whatever, and you'll be able to sort through and see that. But there are certain players that are arbitration eligible that I believe you can re-sign over top of their arbitration and skip their arbitration years. So a good example of that would be Jamison Tyone. So Jamison Tyone, for example, for me, he's only 27 years old, and I have 3 years worth of arbitration on him, where when I get to the off season, the arbiter will choose an amount that we have to pay Jamison Tyone, which is usually somewhere in the middle of what we think he's worth and what he thinks he's worth. And if you choose to forego that option of arbitration with these players, that's when you're going to want to contract extend these players or let them walk. So if I were to right now, for example, sign Jamison Tyone to this deal that he wants, it will then forego, I believe, his arbitration years. So if I go ahead and sign him to just this deal that he already wants, and he accepts it, and then I go back over to my budget, you'll see that it changes for him. And that is, if we go ahead and scroll down to Jamison Tyone, if we can find him, now it overrode all of his arbitration years with the salary that we're paying him for those years. So what you're going to want to do is, if there's players that you want to lock up long term and you believe you can get them for a pretty fair price, then you're going to want to lock them up regardless of their arbitration years. And that's something you might want to consider with lower overall high performing players. So a guy like Chad Kuhl, for example, I might be able to get for a really good long contract at a really fair price and avoid having arbitration, or later on when his overall goes up, paying him a higher amount like I have to pay Jamison Tyone. But if for a player like Jamison Tyone, it might be better off to take those arbitration years, because if you go into arbitration, you're likely not going to have to pay him this full amount of $13.5 million per year that he's requesting, because it's going to fall somewhere more in the middle of what you believe he's worth and what the AI believes he is worth. And so that's kind of how you want to approach free agents or contract extensions. Now, there are players that are straight up free agents after the end of the season. That would be a player like Lonnie Chisenhall, for example. And those players will be up for contract extensions as well during this period. So these are players where if you want to bring them back, you're going to not want to hesitate to re-sign them, because there's no point to, there's no arbitration to try and sort through. What you have is you just have a guy that, you have to make a decision on. Do I want to bring back Lonnie Chisenhall for $2.2 million per year. Now, he might be more of a feasible player because he's, still got some years left in him. He's 30 years old, whereas Melky Cabrera is a very similar player, but he is decreasing a lot in stats. He's already 34 years old, so I might not want to sign him to another contract. So this is how you work around signing players in MLB The Show 19. This is rather important for the game in general, because if you're planning on playing multiple years, you're going to want to re-sign these players, and a lot of players on your team are going to be up to be re-signed. As you can see with my team, I have Trevor Williams, Jameson Taillon, Josh Bell, Corey Dickerson, Richard Rodriguez, Keone Kela, lots of pretty important players for me, and they're going to be at varying stages where I'm going to have arbitration on some of them. They're going to be players that are contracts are straight up, players that don't have arbitration, stuff like that, and that's going to tell you how to kind of work through those things. So remember, you can do this during spring training, you can do this during this period on July 15th, 3 days after the All-Star game, so make sure you don't just past this, because this is pretty important, and this is going to set you up for the trade deadline to determine who you're going to want to trade away, because you're not going to be able to re-sign them, or you don't want to re-sign them, or something like that. So that's why it's structured the way it is. It actually makes a lot more sense than I thought the game did at first. So hopefully this video helped you guys out and gave you some idea of how you're going to re-sign your players moving forward. If you want me to do a further in-depth breakdown, I didn't have the time today, but I can certainly do a further in-depth breakdown about how I evaluate who I'm going to re-sign. And in my next episode of the Pittsburgh Pirates franchise, I'm obviously going to go in and do contract extensions for all these players and show you guys exactly what I do to sign different players. So that might be a good learning lesson for you guys as well if you are interested. So keep a lookout for that video. I'll see you guys in my next video, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Feel free to leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel for more, and leave a comment as always, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Hope you have a great day.